800 million. I mean, think about that for a second. That is the staggering number of weekly active ChatGPT users interacting with OpenAI's platform right now. And look, when an ecosystem operates at that kind of massive, mind-boggling scale, any update to the underlying model, well, it has immediate compounding effects on literally everything we're building worldwide. It's really not just another product update, right? It fundamentally shifts how professional software gets written, how our agents reason, and ultimately how businesses operate.
So welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to be your guide today as we synthesize OpenAI's latest major announcement, right alongside their brand new technical docs. We're going to unpack the new flagship model, GPT-5.2, and figure out exactly what this means for you. We're cutting through all the hype and noise to look directly at what's actually changed, and, most importantly, what you as a developer need to know to harness these new capabilities.
Okay, here is our game plan for today. First, the code red release. Number 2, the 3 new variants. 3, the benchmark battle. 4, the developer playbook. And finally, number 5, mastering long contexts. Let's just dive right in.
Section 1, the code red release. To really get GPT 5.2, we first got to look at the hyper-competitive environment surrounding its launch on June 5th, 2026. Because, this launch absolutely did not happen in a vacuum. Internally, OpenAI executives framed this period as a code red prioritization push. And sure, CEO Sam Altman clarified this wasn't some panic response to Google's Gemini 3, but come on, the competitive context is undeniably real. What's actually wild here is that GPT 5.1 shipped literally just a few weeks ago. The release cadence in the AI industry is just accelerating at this breakneck pace. The gap between these models is shrinking in calendar time, even though the capability jumps between them remain, frankly, huge. All right, moving on to Section 2, the 3 new variants. Because instead of dropping just one model, OpenAI actually shipped 3 distinct flavors of GPT 5.2 at the exact same time.
So here's the new lineup we're looking at: Instant, Thinking, and Pro. Let's break them down. Instant is your go-to for speed and everyday tasks. And what's really awesome for developers here is that it front-loads key information in its responses. That means you're spending way less time writing clunky code to parse and re-rank outputs for your search assistants. Next up is Thinking. This one's built for complex, multi-step work. Think math, logic, agentic coding. OpenAI keeps using the word polish for this variant, and it makes sense because it produces much better organized, highly structured outputs. And finally, we have Pro. This is targeted at those high-stakes, highest accuracy scenarios where getting it exactly right is way more important than your latency or cost budgets. And if you want to ground these corporate claims in reality, just look at this quote from Jeff Wang, the CEO of Windsurf. He notes that calling it a 0.2 version bump actually undersells the massive jump in intelligence here. In fact, Windsurf decided to make the Thinking variant their default model across a bunch of core workloads. I mean, when a major coding tool provider with massive, real-world production usage commits to a model as its default out of the gate, that's a highly meaningful signal. Which brings us to Section 3, the benchmark battle. We know these models are smart, but how do they actually stack up against the fierce competition in autonomous coding? Well, what's really fascinating here is this ongoing tug of war in the industry. OpenAI is proudly claiming the lead on SW Bench Pro, which is a major evaluation for autonomous coding agents. But on the flip side, Anthropic claims that their Opus 455 outperforms GPT-5 2.2 on a totally separate benchmark called SW Bench Verified. OpenAI says the verified benchmark is way too narrow. Anthropic stands by their numbers. Look, as objective observers here, we have to remember that vendor benchmarks ultimately measure what vendors choose to measure. Independent, third-party evaluations are what we're really going to need to watch for to settle the score. But honestly, beyond those synthetic benchmarks, the real-world enterprise validation for GPT 5.2 is long and very specific. You've got companies like Notion, Box, and Shopify utilizing it for state-of-the-art long-horizon reasoning. Databricks and Hex are finding it exceptional for agentic data science and complex document analysis. And heavy hitters in the coding space, like Cognition and JetBrains, they're reporting measurable gains in interactive coding, code reviews, and finding tricky bugs. It is clearly handling an incredibly broad spectrum of autonomous tool calling tasks in production right now. All right, Section 4, the developer playbook. So, if you're actually building with this model today, what do you need to do differently? OpenAI's official prompting guide highlights a few fundamental behavioral shifts compared to GPT 5.1. First off, right out of the box, GPT 5.2 builds much more deliberate scaffolding and plans. It also generally has a lower baseline verbosity, so it's more concise, more task-focused.
It features much stronger instruction adherence, which is great, meaning less drift from your user intent. And finally, it has a very conservative grounding bias. This means it strongly favors correctness and explicit reasoning and handles ambiguity a lot better, especially if you actively prompt it for clarification. So here's the crucial takeaway. Higher capability requires tighter constraints. Because GPT 5.2 is so incredibly strong at structured code, it's actually prone to scope drift, especially in front-end tasks. It might enthusiastically add design embellishments, slick animations, or extra UI components that you literally never asked for. And let's be real, absolutely nobody wants surprise animations popping up in their enterprise dashboard. So as a developer, you really must clamp verbosity down hard. Explicitly forbid extra features in your system prompt and force the model to constrain its styling strictly to your existing design system tokens.
When you're ready to actually migrate your existing GPT-5 or 5.1 prompts over to 5.2, you're going to want to follow this exact timeline. Step 1, just switch the models without changing the prompt at all. That way, you're testing the new model, not your edits. Step 2, and guys, this is absolutely critical. Pin the reasoning effort parameter to match your prior model's latency profile. If you skip this, you might fall into provider default thinking traps that totally skew your API costs. Step 3, run your baseline evals. Step 4, if you see regressions, use targeted constraints to tune the prompt. And step 5, rerun those evals. Always test one variable at a time.
Okay, moving to our final part, Section 5, Mastering Long Contexts. How exactly do we manage massive token loads in these complex, multi-step agent flows?
Well, OpenAI has introduced a fascinating new endpoint called compaction. Honestly, think of this like a highly intelligent zip file for your conversation history. For those long-running, tool-heavy workflows that threaten to just blow right past your standard context window, this new endpoint performs a loss-aware compression pass. It takes the prior conversation state and returns these encrypted, opaque items. And this dramatically reduces your token footprint, which lets the model reason continuously without hitting those hard context limits. It's a real game changer. But, and this is a big but, you shouldn't use this on every single turn. The API docs actually advise triggering compaction only for multi-step agent flows with tons of tool calls, exceptionally long conversations, or iterative reasoning loops that you know are definitely going to exceed the max window. The best practice here is to trigger compaction after major milestones. For example, right after a heavy tool calling phase. That keeps the context window lean and mean for the next stage of reasoning.
And there's a secondary technique you absolutely need to know for massive token loads. When you're dealing with context over 10,000 tokens, we're talking multi-chapter documents or massive sprawling code bases, models can still suffer from what we call lost in the scroll errors. To prevent this, the prompting guide strongly recommends forcing summarization and regrounding. How do you do that? Simply prompt the model to produce an internal outline of the relevant sections before it generates its final response. This forces the model to recall and organize that dense context first, which significantly improves the final accuracy. Which leaves us with this final, really important question to reflect on. Is your prompt engineering actually ready for GPT 5.2? Look, this model represents a massive leap forward for agentic workflows, but it demands discipline from us. Take a hard look at your code bases today. Are your verbosity constraints strict enough? Are you actively pinning your reasoning effort? The tools to build incredibly powerful, reliable agents are all sitting right here in front of us. Now it's up to you to constrain them correctly. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy building.